So when will you hear back from medical schools about their interviews? This is a common question we normally get from our students and from students that normally either use our services or just reading our blogs, watching one of these videos, or listening to one of the podcasts. And it's a good question to have because people get a little bit nervous if they haven't gotten any interviews and they wonder, is this it? Is it over for me? Should I start reapplying? Should I reconsider plan Bs, or is there still a chance? So I want to tell you what your strategy should be and how you can decide whether or not it's time to move on or whether or not you should still keep up hope and start preparing. The first thing you need to realize is that when you're invited for an interview depends on a couple of factors. So medical schools either have a rolling admission process or they have a process that is not rolling. So I want to first tell you about what happens for interviews and interview dates if the admissions process is not rolling process. So if that's the case, that means there is a set deadline. You're applying at a specific time when applications open, but there's absolutely no advantage whether you submit your application on day one when application opens or on the very last day when the deadline is due. Because if it's not rolling admission, they're gonna essentially hold on to all applications until the deadline before they start assessing people for suitability of their program. Now, if the admissions process in any school that you've applied to is not rolling, the best way to find out when they're going to invite applicants for interviews is go on the official website, or if this is not available on the official website, you could contact the admission office. And normally on their official admission site, they're going to say the exact dates when interview invitations are sent out. And they're also going to indicate the exact dates interviews are held. So there's normally no question about those type of schools when there's no rolling admission. And if you pass those dates and you haven't been, invited for an interview, you could assume safely that you've been rejected, even if you haven't gotten a letter from them yet. Past a certain stage, if you still haven't heard back, that means you've not been invited, most likely, and it's time to either move on or start preparing for the next cycle. Now, what if the admissions process for the schools you're applying to are a rolling admissions process? So what happens in a rolling admission process is, every few weeks, the admissions office decides between the pool of applicants who are still in the running, they're gonna do three things to the pool of applicants. They're gonna assess them against each other, and they're gonna either invite them for an interview, or they're gonna reject them outright, or they're gonna keep them on file and don't send rejection or invitation and keep them until later. This process essentially starts as soon as, let's say, June, July of the year you apply normally, and they keep doing this until sometime the end of winter, early spring, depending on what school it is. And they keep doing this, and if you have not received a rejection letter and an invitation, you're still essentially in the running until you get to the last possible dates for interviews. So you could always ask the admission office, what are the last possible dates of you guys sending interview invitations, so that you could assess where you are still. But normally, if you've applied to sufficient number of schools, let's say 10, 20, 15, and you haven't heard back from any of them, and now let's say you're essentially early winter's already starting, you should already be considering your plan Bs and preparing for the next cycle. Having said that, the best strategy is, regardless of whether rolling admission or not rolling, the minute you've submitted your application, you should be preparing for interviews. The problem is that a lot of students make a major mistake. They think they're going to have enough time for interviews, and I'm going to, essentially prepare for my interview when I get an interview invitation. Wrong mindset, because you don't know when that invitation is coming, and normally they only give you 1 or 2 weeks, which may not be enough, right? Maybe it's enough, maybe not. You don't want to take a risk on your life with this sort of a thought process. That's not the right thought process. The minute you've submitted your applications is the minute you're going to start preparing for interviews. And secondly, as I told you, if it's not rolling admission, I explained to you when it's time for you to move on and start preparing for the next cycle or your plan B, whatever that may be. Versus if it's rolling admission, again, there is a way to know when it's time to start preparing for your next cycle. I would say once you hit winter time, Even if you have not received a rejection letter and the school has rolling admission, I would say you should already be starting preparing for the next cycle, making improvements, because you want to give yourself again enough time. You don't want to make the same mistake again. If you're applying again, the chances are that you didn't do well. You don't know what that is 100%. So you have to start preparing and discovering what went wrong. Secondly, there's a good chance you didn't spend enough time on the applications and you did it last minute. But if this time you go all the way from, winter time all the way to spring, when it's time when the applications open up and you're ready to apply right away, and for admissions that are rolling, that's the advantage to submit right away, because like I told you, every few weeks they're gonna select people from the pool of applicants they have. Either they're gonna invite them, or they're gonna reject them, or they're gonna keep them. And every time you're assessed against others. So the advantage of applying very, very, very early on, if possible, of course, you don't want to send a crappy application either, right? Assuming you've made a really good application, you spend enough time on it, submit it right away. It gives you the chance so that if you're not a stellar 100% type of person that's going to get invited right away, if you're in the maybe pile, you're going to get multiple chances to be assessed against others. And eventually, one of those times when they're doing that, they're going to be like, now this guy or girl is above average, let's invite for an interview. That's why there's a huge advantage to always be preparing in advance and also applying as soon as possible if it's a rolling admission. I hope this helps out, alleviate some anxiety, and give you some ideas of how to navigate this. I know it's a truly stressful process, and I hope this helped you out. If it did, go ahead and share it with a friend, and subscribe on whatever social media channel you're watching this, and I hope to talk to you soon.